All right, we are live. Uh, this is TGRS, the John Ross Show. No, not really. It's not the actual show. This is a special Sunday edition of TGRS, a Sunday interview edition, and I am with R.C. Roberts, a writer. He does a Substack called Ferocia Animi. I figured I messed that up. Hope I didn't.
No, that's
And
right. That's right. Yeah.
and RC is with me now. How are you doing, man?
I'm. It's all right for for a Sunday. I don't have to go to work tomorrow, so it doesn't really
Yeah, I
feel
just remembered it's Labor Day weekend. We're all
yeah.
kind of taking the day off, aren't we?
Right. Yeah.
Uh, so, welcome to the show, and thanks for getting up real early.
Oh, it's not real early. It's about
Not,
noon. Well, I was gonna say I'm usually up by 9, but I know what you mean.
well,
I appreciate you having me on though.
yeah, this was actually something that we talked about a few weeks ago, or
Yes.
maybe even longer than that, about doing something like this. And I've explained to my viewers since I started the show that I want to kind of do something different and make the show better. And this is one of the things I want to do, and have interesting people on to interview and talk about. And as always, for the people who watch, you like and subscribe on YouTube, like on Twitch. Yeah. So let's get started. So you've written this article as I start screen sharing here.
Right.
Um,
I was gonna say real quick, so just so your viewers know, I gave John carte blanche to go through my articles and see which ones he liked and pick apart which ones. So I am totally at his mercy to see what exactly he picked out and what he has to say.
well, I actually went through several, and as I do the picture in picture here, um, I went through several, and this one kind of latched out at me because this was somebody who I sort of kind of admired, and I'm talking specifically about Nathan J. Robinson. The,
Right. Yeah. Well, I
the
mean, you can admire OnlyFans too if you want.
Oh yeah, I didn't really get that far into the article. I wanted to
Oh
stick
no,
to
it's all good.
Robinson. I'm like, but if we're gonna for a Sunday, let's talk about the issue with OnlyFans.
Well, I know porn is next to godliness.
Of course. Oh boy, this is
Yeah.
look at
Right.
us. We're getting right off to the hook, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I guess I'll kind of give you the floor for those who aren't familiar, and for those who want to read the article, I'll put it in the link in YouTube. So RC, could you tell us a little what the article is about?
Well, I have a series of articles called Notes in the Margins, and I try to do it weekly. Unfortunately, I missed this week, but that's because I'm working on a bigger article. But I try to do it weekly. And what I do is I'll pick 2 to 3 topics every week, and I will more or less discuss them, kind of give my opinions on things that are going on. In this particular article, there were 2 major events going on. I was going to try to put in a third, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to focus on these 2. And the 2 issues were Nathan Robinson and OnlyFans. Um, what I try to do in my writing is I try to approach how people are thinking about things and kind of reveal either where it doesn't make sense or at least try to make things a little bit more clear. Um, that's the thrust of my leftist critique. And so in this particular article, I wanted to tackle the Nathan Robinson issue because it felt like a lot of the people who were trying to tackle it were doing a horrible job, as per usual for left Twitter and left
Right,
book.
right,
And so, well, because like for example, a lot of the people who give commentary, who are well known for their commentary, let's say Caitlin Johnstone, because I particularly dislike her. Um, she, they would give out these 1 sentence responses where they just make fun of how he looks, and it's like, well, a leftist critique of trying to understand a situation or what's going on, that's ridiculous.
Right.
I'm not above making fun of people for how they look. I'm a funny looking person myself, so it happens. But at the same time, um, you should try to take the situation a little more seriously. And so, what I attempt to do in the article, you can tell me if I uh, achieve my goal. We'll see here in a second.
Right.
Is I
Okay.
try to establish that I think Nathan Robinson, in my opinion, and this is just me being my cynical
Right.
contrarian self, is I find him to be a ridiculous sort of writer. He wrote his memoirs at 28, and as I noted in the article, you know, only giant egos get that tired that quickly. And I he wrote a memoir based upon this idea that his future self came and told him how the future's came and told his present self how the future is going to be. And what's funny is that future self seemed to leave out seems to have left out this particular debacle on his part. So maybe it's not very helpful to have your future self come tell you anything. But while ridiculous, I wanted to establish that his hypocrisy should not really surprise people. Um, Again, as I say in the article, I kind of go by a quotation from H.L. Mencken when I'm dealing with people, and his quotation is that it is a sin to believe evil of others, but it is seldom a mistake. And so I I'm not surprised by the hypocrisy. I personally don't think that even though he advocated and he would be a hypocrite for not establishing a workers co-op, I don't personally think I would do that as a writer because I run my own Substack, Ferocia Animi. I have contributors,
Right.
and so not as much as him, obviously. So maybe the situation's a tad different, but I would never give up that kind of control.
Right.
And so that's what I try to establish because I think I think that the thinking around Nathan Robinson was either shallow
Mm-hmm.
or it was caught up in sort of, oh, this is my particular perspective from my very particular sort of part of the leftist ideology.
Right.
And so that I hopefully that's what the article established for you. What did you think of it?
Well, like my whole thing with that, with you saying that you would I think what would you say you wouldn't do a workers comp, but
I would not know.
you would you wouldn't like take it all for yourself. You would give like staffers who work if they work for you, you would give them their due.
Well, yes, you're supposed to do that with contributors. For example, I try to make sure that whenever somebody contributes, I make sure that their article gets the right kind of press. I try to make sure that. Unfortunately, I can't pay anybody right now because
Right.
I'm working class. I work as a janitor, and so I have to make my money. But I I try to make sure that they get their due as pointed out. Um, do you really think that was the case, that people weren't getting their due, or because I know there's two competing narratives right now, which
Right.
maybe you can go in depth on this more than I can, because I definitely am looking at this as an outsider. But I know
Mm.
there's two competing narratives. There's the one from the disgruntled individual, and then there's the long statement that Nathan Robinson wrote out.
Well, I kind of go in the view of the statement of the individual, which I
Right.
call the staffers. I read this statement on both sides. I had to say that, look, at the end of the day, I've read Nathan Robinson. I have high respect for him. I did think his book, Why You Should Be a Socialist, was pretty good. I actually started reading it it was pretty good. When I say that, I mean it wasn't like fantastic by any
Right,
means,
right, yeah.
but it was readable. There were some parts that were pretty good. And I think he's a good. He's at least a decent writer. I think what he did with current affairs, like the way he did it in college, and kind of worked his way up from being the organization that it is now. I have a lot of respect for that. Having said that, where I side with the workers is the fact that I spoke to one of the workers, the staffers, privately, and she basically gave me a full detail, as much as she could, about when they started the workers co-op. Nathan didn't seem to have a problem with it in the beginning. He was all for it, and then it actually happening. In the statement they had a Zoom meeting, and when the issue was brought up, Nathan became very belligerent. He was very violent in some respects. He was just trying to take things for himself. Even though he started the publication, like I said, let's give the people that they work for their due. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I certainly wouldn't like, and like he was also giving people, like, he was firing people, and then like also keeping other people and like giving them what they call proposition jobs to stay without any kind of change in the schedule.
Yeah. Right. Well, I just want to I just want to make it clear for your viewers. So when you say he becomes violent, you mean just verbally, right?
Yeah, verbally, not like physically. This was all a Zoom meeting. Like, you could, if you haven't seen the statement by Lita Gold and several other staffers who worked at CA, they point out in the statement that Nathan became belligerent and was just trying to keep everything for himself.
Right.
Which,
right.
As someone who, again, he started a magazine, he grew it to substantial proportions in 4 or 5 years. He employed people who, did great work, and also I want to kind of give Nathan his due as a writer, because he's actually broken some really good stories, specifically with Noam Chomsky, his critique of Jordan Peterson. I think the one the one that I actually kind of liked was his he didn't call it a book review, but this is how I interpret it, of Crystal Ball and Sargon Jetty's book 2020 Census, and that they responded to it when they were still doing Rising, and Crystal responded to it in a Radar, and then Nathan responded to her response, and I just thought, wow, that's that's interesting.
Right. Yeah. And I I'll put it this way, and I put this in the article, so you probably already know this, but one of the suspicions I had about Nathan Robinson was when he wrote out his statement, it seems to oscillate. It goes between this reason and that reason, and those reasons and these reasons. And my rule is that when somebody gives you multiple reasons, they're searching for what you want to hear.
Right.
And so I think he's definitely squirming under the pressure. Now, if you wanted to get into a more, we can call it philosophical. I'm not sure if it necessarily fits the bill, but if you want to
Philosophical is the best word.
yeah, if you want to get into a philosophical topic about hypocrisy, on one hand, it is bittersweet for him to talk. He talked about how like there was a tweet where he talked about how Ben Shapiro should, put a workers co-op in the Daily Wire, and how dare he, whatever. But then he doesn't do it himself. While I'm personally not all for worker co-ops, I rather don't care for anarchists. It's a prejudice of mine.
Right.
Which doesn't mean that they're bad people, and doesn't mean that
Right.
solidarity is out of the question. But this is me being cynical and a little bitchy. But Um, I I don't care for workers co-ops. Um, and um, I am aware of the fact that it's not exactly the same as, say, a workers union, which I think
Hmm.
is important. But um, I don't know. I guess the hypocrisy doesn't surprise me. Um, it's very hard for writers to give up their vision when people start to associate with it collectively. Um, because it's hard to kind of give up that kind of control when you can set the agenda. We can make
Right.
sure that things say what you want them to say. Um, the writer H.L. Mencken, who is of interest to me, I don't think he's a particularly leftist writer, but he used to write and be an editor for the Baltimore Sun, and he used to have such editorial control that he would rewrite some people's articles completely. So
Oh,
it's, so it sounded like his. So writers have always had sort of this history of, especially good writers, when they get in control, they become editors. It's not really a power people want to give up. Um, but I guess how important is hypocrisy to you? I should probably turn the question over that way.
how important is hypocrisy?
Like because you seem to be reacting to Nathan's hypocrisy with a little bit of a disappointment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do I say this? Oh boy, I hadn't had my coffee this morning, so I'm a little
Oh, it's all good. Take your time.
um, you know, my whole thing with that, with the where I would say Nathan was being a hypocrite, was that he wasn't taking responsibility for his actions, as far as like saying, yeah, I I didn't want to do the work. I wanted to do the workers co-op in the beginning, and then changed my mind at the end. I still wanted to have full control over this magazine that I started, which is fine. I mean, when you start something like that, uh, it's your baby. You want to have you want to have you want to make sure that people are aware that, hey, you started this. It's your thing, and you want to be the leader. But like I said, it's like always trying to let people who are, great writers or decent writers like he is, kind of have their say and do, and let them contribute. Um, a mutual friend of ours, J. Andrew World, uh, said to me earlier on Discord, like, I applied to do artwork for current affairs, and they said no because of some so-called internet drama that was supposedly that he was involved in. I wouldn't know, but I just thought, man,
Well, that's an odd criteria. We're all involved in internet drama. Um, yeah, no. I was going to say our mutual friend there, in fact, told me that he very much enjoyed Nathan Robinson's writing. He even compared him to Christopher Hitchens, which I think is far too generous a compliment. But obviously, he and I disagree on
right,
that. But um, yeah, so that's very interesting. The way it's begun to sort of recoil. Um, it's it's a very odd phenomenon. Um, myself personally, I'm not above elitism. I enjoy judging people, but when you advocate your magazine as something, a libertarian socialist sort of stance,
mm-hmm.
that sort of, let us say, odd kind of, almost a ham-fisted attempt to just you just kind of wave away somebody because of internet drama. That's very odd. However, um, one of the other things that I put in my article that maybe you can comment on if you want is
Okay,
that I think that the whole phenomenon with Nathan Robinson reveals a deeper hollowness to the left.
mm-hmm.
and I don't say this in an unkind way. I say this in a sort of alarm, because to me, the left believes in its representatives more than its
Mhm.
movement.
Right.
And so the reason for the let us say the hysteria, or to use their term, the internet drama surrounding Nathan Robinson, is I think centered on the fact that the left doesn't believe in itself, and so when it comes by, it's in a form of dependency, and so when it comes by a representative who doesn't, let us say, who doesn't live up to their standards, then there's
Mhm.
kind of a whole hysterical response to it, because all of a sudden it's not just about Nathan Robinson being a hypocrite, which everybody
Right.
is to some extent. Um, it's all about, kind of letting the left down. It becomes sort of uh the reverse of a hero worship, really, where somebody falls from grace,
Right.
and they seem to bring their whole movement, or at least their part of the leftist movement, down with them.
Right.
Yeah, and it seems like a kind of hollowness.
Right. And I certainly agree. I mean, the left has a lot of the left is not perfect, and for those of us that are leftist, maybe we would have some different views on how the left should be run, um, but still, it's all about unity and coming together and bringing those different ideas and visions together. And you know, we've just become so fractured that it's like even good, like faith actor people on the left that have good intentions, that have done really well as far as like supporting certain people or using certain avenues like what we do as ways to bring in good faith arguments, have bought into certain people and have basically allowed that person to say their view without actually questioning it, if you get what I'm saying.
Right, yeah, and I also think that it forces a lot of actors into a sort of false perfection,
Mhm.
where they have to be, you have to be on all the time, so to speak. You have to be able to, you have to pretend that you're completely consistent all the time, and that you don't hold any bad views. And unfortunately, the problem with the view being good or bad is that you never know if it's good or bad until you've said it. Well,
Right.
with several, obvious exceptions, but
Mhm.
within the realm of leftist discourse, let's leave out extremes here.
Right.
Usually you can say something that pertains to the left, and um, you don't it doesn't seem like a big deal until you've said it.
Right.
Now, I will say this: the way I look at the left is a lot like, I take from the psychoanalyst Wilfred Bion, who did studies of groups, psychological, or the psychological dynamics of groups, because the left overall is a group. It has a long history, and it's
Right.
it's a group that has definitely fractured. And for me, I think that in a group, Bion says that in the group, usually if they don't have a goal, they don't have a main objective, let us say, that they revert to what he calls a basic assumption, or what we would probably call a pathological instinct. Um, for Bion, there's three of those. There's dependency, fight or flight, or pairing, and I'm not going to go into explaining all of it, but I think that the left is definitely in a pathological desire for um, dependency.
Mhm.
We are constantly looking for somebody to save us, or something to save us. Let us say, for example, there's a recent article. It was written August 13th, um, where Cornell West was talking to the Atlantic, and
Mhm.
I'm crudely summing it up because I don't want to take up too much time.
No,
But
no. Take
um,
as much time as you
he
need.
he uh, he basically establishes his idea that the left needs Jesus, or broadly speaking, religion. And while I'm not against religious people in and of themselves, or people who have religious beliefs, I will say that I don't think that that's a good approach. I think that's feeding
Right.
kind of the pathological dependency. Oh, we just need this and everything will be okay. And I think, if we truly wanted to get ourselves out of the rut, which would be hard to do, we would have to find a goal, or particularly an interest, which we could unite on. As opposed to, we don't need a leader. We don't need somebody to say, hey, this is the way to go,
Hmm.
because all of our leaders turn into, oh, there's a French guy, and I don't know how to say his name, but there's a French guy in the French Revolution who famously said, uh, there go my people, and I need to follow them because I'm their leader. and
Right.
and so that seems to be kind of how the internet works, where people, you know aren't, taking the lead. They're not particularly engaging with issues or ideas. They're looking for followers,
Right.
which which is, not a good way to approach anything.
Right.
So that's generally my view of the left. And the problem with that is that when the left then has to deal with the right,
Mm.
the right is, um I don't know if you saw the recent interview with Chris Catrone on Zero Books with
I
Douglas
have not.
Slade. Well, he was talking about somebody in Platypus Affiliates, which is a group that I'm actually trying to become a part of.
Hmm.
They spent an internship or whatever at a right wing group, and I guess the guy came back and he said that it's just as broken up and just as ridiculous as it is on the left. So I guess there's hope. But
Yeah.
um when the left meets the right on political issues, perhaps it's best said that we are more in a state of decay than the right. And so it
Yeah.
causes us to be unable to answer, particular issues. Um yeah.
And it prevents from things getting done. When you look at like the fracturing of the left, that is, one person says this and another person says that, and I guess I won't name names here, although I kind of want to. Like there's a certain like podcast person on the left who used to work at another organization and then left that organization and has been trashing that organization, that place since. And he goes on Tucker Carlson's show religiously nowadays.
Right. I
And
think, yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
mm, we could say it.
Well, I'll say this.
We don't have to.
Well, I was gonna say, well, we should probably make sure that I'm thinking of the right person.
Mhm.
You said podcaster. Are you talking about Matt Taibbi, or
Um,
am I mistaken?
no, you're
Because
mistaken. I was thinking of Jimmy Dore, but
Jimmy.
close
Oh,
enough.
oh, oh, God. I try not to. I try not to think of Jimmy Dore.
Neither do I, but
I
he's
well,
always in the headlines, and we just have to talk about him. And even though we're
well,
resisting the
well.
take.
I say that I try not to think about Jimmy Dore, but I do try to do thinking for him, since he seems to be without much thought. Um,
Of
and
course,
and
of course.
and well, and it's kind of like, I was trying to say this on Forrest's podcast, and I didn't get enough time to do it. But Gore Vidal spoke about Al Franken, and you could probably just apply it to Jimmy Dore. But
Hmm.
he's a comedian who's never made anybody laugh, and he's
Hmm.
somebody who's written things that are nobody should read, because they don't make any points. Um, and it seems to be all he does is he wants to be our favorite demagogue, and we
Yeah.
don't need demagogues.
Right.
You know, people are concerned about pipelines, you know, that lead from, you know, certain beliefs to certain right wing beliefs, but we should be concerned about the pipeline that leads from second rate comedians to demagogues, because we seem to have a lot of those. Um, but um, oh, you know, the the issue with Jimmy Dore is that he knows how to make us angry. He knows how to poke our lizard brains.
Hmm.
He knows how to reach the very bottom, you know, where our brain began its evolution, but he never brings it to thought. He
Right.
shortcuts. He shortcuts the process, because anger is justified sometimes. Um, but when you don't do anything about it, like here, for example, I'll go in depth on this. So he makes the argument about needing Medicare for all.
Hmm.
But God forbid you do, and Medicare is a part of the system, to
Right.
put it in that way. It's a part of the system. It was developed by politicians, and it is something that if you want to deal with, you have to deal with politicians. But
Right.
God forbid you decide to deal with politicians at all, because he will attack you and he'll say, "Oh, you're giving into the powers that be."
Right.
And the thing is this: it's like, look, either you want to have a discussion and deal with the reforms that need to take place for Medicare to become Medicare for all, in which case, whether you like it or not, you have to go into the snake pit and deal with
Yeah.
the politicians who have that power, or you're asking for me to go outside the system, in which case you're not going to be dealing with Medicare at all. And
Right.
so it's like, what do you want? Because you can't have both.
Right.
And, I know the idea of a contradiction, or to make it a smaller word so maybe he'll understand, a paradox.
Hmm.
It maybe might be foreign to him, but it's something that doesn't necessarily work, especially as a tactic. Hold all the rallies you want,
Right.
spend all the time you want yelling at people and, you know, being upset, but you've done nothing.
Right.
And as you pointed out, he spends a lot of time just trashing people, and it's like, well, that's not leftism. That's some high school, some high school nonsense.
Yeah.
That's
Definitely.
yeah, that's probably why he's so popular on Twitter, because it appeals to those digital illiterates.
Right.
Um,
Well, that's like my whole thing with forced to vote is that, even if some of the things, I mean, I'll just be full disclaimer here. I do not support forced to vote. I do support Medicare for all. But the only reason why is because it's just not run by the right people. That's the
right.
thing with me is that I do my research on on these movements and whatnot. Like I did research on Occupy uh, about 10 years ago, and saw that those guys and gals doing that is reasonable, and I was fully supportive of that. With Force the Vote, it's not run by the right people. Jimmy Dore is not the type of person to be running this organization or this movement. And like I said, people that are good faith people, like leftists, podcasters, whatever you want to call them, uh, are going into that movement and just accepting it for what it is. They're not willing to question it. And that's my problem. That's my big problem. That's been
Right.
my problem from day one. That's my problem now. And there's also a whole ton of the other side of the left that people that I support, even though that I've gotten a lot of crap on social media for doing so, that have questioned force the vote, and they're the ones that get slandered. And
Yes.
I just think, wait a minute, aren't you looking at this from another way? It's
Well,
just it's just my
right.
big thing.
Yeah, and Dore's contradictory approach to dealing with power. Um, there's two things to say about it. One, it leaks over into force the vote, and it's like,
Mm.
okay, so you're going to force the vote by telling people not to talk to politicians, Otherwise, they'll be seen as giving in to the powers that be. Um, you're going to tell them to do that, but then you're going to say, let's force the vote. What vote?
Hmm.
What are you talking about? Are you talking about a vote in Congress? Are you talking about a referendum? The problem is when you get into the details, people, instead of reacting to the details and reacting to some kind of semblance of logical thinking, become mad. They become angry and instinctive. And there was somebody, I was watching a Twitter exchange, reading,
Hmm.
just trying to you know keep myself from having brain cell death. But yeah, I was reading some Twitter exchanges between Jimmy Dore, people he doesn't agree with, and his followers.
Right.
And there was a follower, and I don't remember who it was, so I apologize for being a
No,
little spotty on the details. But there was somebody who said almost word for word what George W. Bush said about terrorists. They just changed the last word, where they were
right.
like, "Well, if you're not with us, you're with the
You're with
right."
two. Yeah.
Yeah, or I forget exactly who it was that was their target, because they've had their explosive issues with quote unquote libtards and shit libs and whatever. They come up with nonsense constantly.
Right.
But and it's like, okay, what kind of thinking is that? That is you know not only a ridiculous kind of thinking, it's authoritarian. And
Right.
so it's like, isn't the left against authoritarianism? Aren't we
Yeah.
supposed to be against that kind of nonsense?
Authority. Yeah. Authority nonsense.
Right.
Being told what to do and how to do it, and Jimmy Dore, for whatever reason, just kind of buys into it
Well,
one way
I,
or
I, I
another.
think I think it's because it's lucrative.
Yeah.
The ability to um it's the ability to poke our amygdala and get us to jump
Hmm.
is lucrative, because that's what our algorithms, in my opinion, are based on. It's what our advertising is based on.
Hmm.
It's to get us to react. It is
Right.
to get us to indulge in the animal instincts that we have. And so it's lucrative because um advertisements, for all their oddness now and all the weird ways they present themselves, they work. People are buying things, and so it's lucrative for him. um
Right.
and when you can go on a quote unquote comedy tour and read your tweets, that is the least amount of effort for the most amount of money,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned. So there's that part. But the second thing is this: I think Jimmy Dore is more importantly a symptom of the fact that I think the left is unable to deal with the notion of power. Now, the right is probably, or well, we've had confirmation from the person from Platypus Affiliates, they're just as messed up as we are. But
Right.
I think that they have an ability, and it's a bad thing for us. They have an ability to grapple with power, however they come to understand it, however they rationalize it, however they justify it. They can do it better than us. And Jimmy Dore is a symptom of people who don't want to deal with power.
Hmm.
They don't want to deal with the fact that we have power structures, or politicians, or CEOs who pay for politicians.
Right.
They don't want to deal with that. They want to think that if they wait long enough, revolution will come. Revolution for a lot of leftists is almost like the second coming of Christ. They're just waiting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate to say that. It's not a good thing, because I think what a lot of people believe in is a sort of a spontaneous revolution. They think it will just out of nowhere happen. Like V for Vendetta, people just get together. And it's like,
Right.
well, that's not how that works. You know, um, people don't. Um, People don't just spontaneously do things. They need. Why do you think we have street signs? We need them so we know where we're going. And so you need
Yeah.
people who, yeah, you need people who will organize, who will come together. You have to put in the work. You know, the revolution's not going to happen in a day. It's
Right.
not
It's
going to
not going to
happen.
happen overnight either.
Yeah, it's not even going to happen in a week. It probably won't even happen in 5 years, even with organizational efforts. But you have to organize. You know, and so Jimmy Dore is definitely a symptom of that. Jimmy Dore, in my opinion, is sort of a in the work of Wilfred Bion. When people indulge in one particular pathology, which for us is dependent, dependency, being dependent upon leaders on the left, it also allows for kind of this festering of other pathologies,
Hmm.
the other two pathologies, and one of those pathologies is fight or flight. And
Right.
Jimmy Dore, his contradiction is entirely built upon the notion of fight or flight. It's entirely sort of this animalistic, oh, we're just gonna fight them. You know, that's the only reason we're here is to get on Twitter and call people names. And it's
Right.
like, well, it's like, is that why we're here? You know,
Right.
he's a
And what's
manifestation,
that going to do? Like,
right?
what?
And that's the problem, is that like you said before, you know, what we need is an objective. We need something to organize towards. We don't need sort of, we don't need more representatives. We don't need more leaders. We don't need more people who'll go on late night high out of their mind so that they can talk about Tulsi Gabbard for the 15 billionth time.
Yeah.
We don't need
Unfortunately.
that. We don't need that. What we need is somebody who's willing to organize, who's willing to say, okay, there's going to be a variety of different perspectives, but there's also going to be a power structure that we have to deal with.
Hmm.
And therefore, we need to organize so that we can deal with power.
Yeah, and then also sort of to put a period on this, all that stuff, it creates a distraction. All the stuff that Jimmy Dore and others in that Force the Vote movement, like I said, they're good people. Some of them are not. There's not all of them, but some of them
Right.
are. It's just a distraction they're creating from the real issue of getting, uh, you know, Medicare, like free healthcare, is what it's supposed to be. No one's really saying that. It's like free college, tuition-free college. As a college student, I support that, and I look forward to the day that that comes. I don't care how long I have to wait. I know it's going to happen,
Right.
and I don't mean to be too much of an optimist about it, but
Well,
um,
I have all the cynicism in the world to balance you out, so you can be optimistic if you want to.
oh, I appreciate it. So I want to kind of jump into the article a little bit because reading it. So we've talked about Nathan Robinson. We discussed him. So going on from that, and I may come back to a relatable subject with Matt Taibbi because
Right.
I have been reading him a lot lately, and I wanted to talk. I didn't really. So to be quite honest, RC, I went to. I read all the Nathan Robinson issue, and when I got to the OnlyFans, I was like, oh, should I? I should probably wait and talk about that in person and kind of share that, um, because I do have one. It is a very sensitive subject, um, but also, it's about again
Well,
this sort of workers' rights notion of sex work being work. You know.
right. Well, and also it kind of relates to a ban that got reversed. So no,
Hmm.
I can understand. Well, I could talk about it a little bit if you'd like. Um,
Yeah, we're gonna kind of have to like jump around the. Oh, close the article. We're
right.
gonna have to like jump around around the notion because again, this is a very controversial topic we're talking about. We're talking about a somewhat one way or another. It's a controversial topic, and we're talking
Yeah.
about a. Go ahead.
I don't shy away from controversy.
And neither
I
do I.
Right.
My whole thing is the more controversial, the better.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I certainly know I'm going to step on people's toes when this comes out, but so for those who just need a re-up about the issue of OnlyFans, and if you want even more in depth, go to I don't know if you watched the Antifada at all on Twitch or a podcast with
Yes.
Jamie Peck.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
And so they did a whole article. They did not a whole article, but they did a whole
segment.
episode of this on their show on the subject of OnlyFans, and if it's still up, I would direct people to go there. I'm not sure I'd be able to find the episode itself on Twitch to put in the link, but if it's still up, go towards the Antifada with Jamie and the crew. I should know all the other names besides hers because I could see him. I think the other guy's name is Patrick.
It's all right. It's like talking about the Avengers. I think as long as you know Iron Man, you're okay.
It's like you know Iron Man, but you don't know all the others. You know who they are. You just can't really.
You're like Iron Man and the Avengers.
It's like me, Jamie Peck and the Antifada. But yeah. So basically, the whole issue with the OnlyFans was they were going to ban certain like creators for doing pornographic material.
Yes.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about this a little more.
Right. So the point of what I wrote was that I thought people were focusing on the wrong thing. It has been a long time in our history that pornography has existed. It started off as a middle class pleasure that was looked down on, but you were allowed to, and then it became the symbol of the lowlifes, the lower classes, the deplorables who used it. And the thing about pornography is that in America, nothing has better business than that combines free expression with the ability to make a buck. And so a lot of people were looking at the ban by OnlyFans and they were saying, oh, it's like a ban on pornography, and it's like, well, no, it's not. It was a ban on the platform itself to ban pornography, but it wasn't going to turn into a widespread thing, in my opinion. It did hurt sex workers, which I didn't quite cover in my article exactly, but the reason I didn't cover it is I wanted to cover something that I found to be more sinister, which was the ability for MasterCard and Visa to put that kind of pressure on an organization to give up basically its main form of content in the name of, I believe they were giving them either a loan or they were gonna help them out in making money in one way or another.
Right.
And if two organizations, corporations, can put that kind of pressure on another organization to change its content, I think that's concerning. And I think that's the main thing that people should be focusing on with OnlyFans. How much power do the banks have, and how is it that they can step into consumer issues and force corporations to give up content? Unfortunately, a lot of people, as I noted, and thankfully I think we've skipped this because they reversed their ban, but a lot of people started to turn it into kind of an aspect of the culture wars, where there would have been moral panic about about pornography itself. There would have been kind of the question of is pornography good or bad. I don't tend to evaluate things in moralistic terms like that. And thankfully we've missed out on that.
Yeah.
I predicted it might happen. And it would have formed very odd alliances because, as I noted, sometimes, kind of like TERF style feminists will go after pornography, because it's an objectification of women, and they would have probably been joined by conservatives who also think women shouldn't be doing pornography, but they think that they should be in the kitchen, just ridiculous things.
It's that puritanical thing.
Yes, right. and oddly enough, Puritanism in America has usually been a government operation. Think about prohibition, for example. Um, the idea that they were going to put that into the market. I will never call it a free market, by the way, but into the
Right.
market was
Call it what you
it,
like.
yeah. Well, I found that to be odd. It was, obviously it got stopped. Obviously the ban got reversed. So
Mhm.
my prediction and my speculations are not entirely relevant anymore.
Mhm.
But it was odd that they were trying to put a form of kind of economic puritanism into the market,
Right.
where they were trying to, you know, um, get rid of sort of sexual content or pornographic content. So um, yeah, so that was my point about OnlyFans, was to kind of get past the hysteria of whether pornography will be banned or not, or you know the questions of
We know that it'll never be banned. I mean,
yeah,
there are even and there are other ways of finding that material, that sort of
right,
pornographic material. I'm not trying to be discreet. I mean, this is just facts.
yes,
This is truth.
right,
There's all. It's like Pornhub uh, banning certain videos that aren't actual performers after a New York Times piece came out where this woman, this young teenager in a Midwestern town, she was assaulted, and her significant other put it up on Pornhub, and
right.
that's when they just had to be like, nope, no videos with
Uh,
identified
uh,
performers. It's
uh,
all
odd,
performer based.
oddly enough, that was the tragedy that led to apparently Mastercard and Visa leaving Pornhub. That's why they
Hmm.
went to OnlyFans in the first place. By the way, is that that article came out by the New York Times, and so they decided to jump ship and head elsewhere.
Right.
And so they landed on OnlyFans. So there's a lot of that stuff wasn't covered. A lot of
Right.
people were just making jokes about, oh, I won't have whatever on OnlyFans, or a lot of people, again, it was bad coverage. It was
Yeah.
definitely not in depth, and so that's why I wrote what I did. I was hoping to get people to be a little bit more interested in the fact that these were moves done by banks
Right.
and by particularly Mastercard and Visa, which should concern people. Um, they tell us we have freedom of choice in the market, but it seems that if you have enough money, you can push people to give up content. So
Right. Or just like have pay people more. Let them give you
right,
more money. You let them give them more money
mhm,
for extra content. It's
right,
kind of the way with the progressive left and like these left wing shows and podcasts. Some all of which I've read and I've subscribed to, yourself included.
mhm,
But I'm also talking about people that like put podcasts on their Substack and whatnot. Like if you want the bonus content, you have to like pay or sign up for a certain membership.
right,
And subscription based media, particularly in the left, has been it's become sort of prevalent. And it has its good sides, it has its bad sides. I wish I could subscribe to every leftist podcast of a diverse nature that I like.
right.
One, because I don't like like for me personally, I don't like just having one slice of the pie. I like having, if you get my euphemism.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking from a Sartrean perspective, not to bring too much philosophy in here, because
uh,
Sartre is my guy. Sartre is the philosopher from whom I develop my positions. But um, you know, he argues that in the world that there's more or less, every object has an infinite number of perspectives, so that you can take on it. So I understand trying to have as many perspectives on something as possible. Ferocia Animi, to do a little promotion.
Yeah, that's what I should ask in the beginning. Like, for the audience, like, how did Ferocia Animi come about?
How did it come about? Well, first
Yeah,
off, I just want to say in relationship to subscribing, Ferocia Animi will never have things behind a paywall
right,
because I believe that people should have access to my articles regardless of whether they should pay. I think it's very, excuse me, not to be too critical of other people who are doing subscriptions, of course,
right.
but I think it's very capitalist to put your stuff behind paywall
Yeah,
and
I
say,
couldn't
hey,
agree more.
yeah, and say, hey, listen, if you want the cool stuff, if you want the real stuff, you have to pay. I
Mhm.
will never do that because I know what it's like as a working class man to want to read something or want to hear something
Mhm.
and go up to it and not be able to because you have to choose between that and paying your bills. And I
Right,
think that's not okay.
and
And
that's the thing with I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
with Jacobin, I love them. I mean, I'll just be honest. I like them. I like what they do. I credit them for being kind of embracing a different leftist political perspective from the moderate liberalism that I was raised under. And I watched Weekends. I watched the Jacobin Show, and it was on for free. Uh, Suddenly, they've decided to operate under a YouTube paywall. Like they put the clips up, but it's like it's the show, but it's in clips, but it's not the full unedited version live like it
Right.
used to. It's under a paywall, so if you want to watch the full show, you have to like pay a certain amount, and like you just said, you have to go between paying for that or paying your bills, and
Right. And
so
my
yeah.
hope my hope is with Ferocia Anime is that when people read my articles, that if you like it enough that you'll decide to support me on your own
Mhm.
because I understand sometimes you can't. Sometimes
Right.
you can't make that payment. That's fine. But if I feel like if you like an artist enough and you use their content enough, you're more or less using their labor, and
Mhm.
so you should be willing to pay for it. Um,
Mhm.
Now, you should not be forced to pay for it. I think that's one of the big differences between a leftist perspective and a capitalist perspective. I don't think you should be forced to have to pay for it.
Right.
But, and maybe that's a bit of a pipe dream of mine, but I also don't believe in withholding content from people.
Yeah.
Now, that said, you asked me about how Ferocia Anime came about. Well,
Mhm.
I had a few blogs actually before I started Ferocia Anime, all of which I have deleted and destroyed because they were not very good. And so, because I started out with a highly philosophical position on things, where things kind of, they kind of became jargon farms, is what I call them. It's like taking a bunch of rocks and throwing it into the dryer. It just, it wasn't talking to anybody. And I thought, if I really wanted to write philosophical theses like this, I could just go to college and write it for nobody in a review. And so I decided, also with wanting to be a better writer, because I think prose and the style of your writing is important, I decided that I would try to write polemics. This is before Ferocia Anime. And so I honed my
Right.
skill, and I'm still trying to hone it, by the way.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, and so, but then I met a good friend of mine, Seth Davis, who hopefully will be on the show on his own.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and he holds some different perspectives from me, and which I find is important. I don't want somebody who's exactly the same as me. For example, he actually does like Jimmy Dore, and
Mhm.
so we have our differences, but we came together and we decided that we wanted a place where discourse could be intelligently developed, because I find that comment sections and Twitter Twitter threads and stuff like that is all about kind of this knee jerk style of communication where
Right.
the point is to react as fast as possible. And he and I decided that we would work together to create Ferocia Animi. Um, and it would be a place where if people could write their ideas. It would also be a place where if you have a disagreement with somebody, instead of just putting it in the comments, we try to invite you to write your dissenting opinion, because
Right.
I think that oftentimes I feel like thoughts are not understood until they are written down or until they are spoken.
Mhm.
And so when somebody has a disagreement with somebody, when they react immediately, oftentimes I feel like you get this jarbled version of whatever it is they actually
Right.
think. And
Yeah.
you also,
It's
yeah, and you also get their prejudice and their bias, things that they're not paying attention to. And so I feel like if you offer for somebody, hey, listen, if you disagree, write it out. It allows them not only to write it out so that their opinion makes sense, it
right.
also allows them to cut out things that maybe aren't helpful or don't make sense.
Mhm.
Certain biases and stuff like that allow for the opinion to be fully developed, and it allows for an actual kind of engagement
Mhm.
where it's a thoughtful engagement that can move the discourse forward. And so we started it, and we have I don't know how many articles we have now. There are several from me, several from Seth, and there's a few from contributors. For example, you brought up that you saw the Medicare for All article.
Yeah.
I actually had a friend of mine, Michael Eaton, who's also friends with Seth Davis, who went to a Medicare for All rally, and he reported back on it. And again, for example, that I allow for perspectives other than my own. Michael Eaton was also for Medicare for All, and I think he's not as enthusiastic about Jimmy Dore as Seth, but he still thinks that he's a force for good.
Right.
And so I've had a variety of different people contribute. In fact I had a newsletter done in June where I had a variety of different writers from the left, because the newsletter is called Voices of the Left. It's an attempt to bring together various perspectives, and I was able to get people like Douglas Lane from Zero Books, Pascal Robert and Jason
Yeah.
Miles, or I'm sorry, not Jason Miles, excuse me, but a variety of different people to contribute to that, so that and so the hope is to try to get discourse to be more thoughtful.
Right.
I like to style myself as a propagandist, both because it's a provocative thing. Everybody
Mhm.
likes to tell everybody else
Everybody
that
does
they're,
it.
yeah. Well, everybody likes to tell everybody else, oh, you're a propagandist. You're just propagandizing whatever. But also, the reason I use the term propagandist, and it's actually in an article on there, is because I feel like writers at their best are dealing with people's thoughts and how they think about
Right.
things.
Right. Good point. So a few other topics. One of the things, like I will say, kind of my own sort of where I came as far as the left. Um, I credit Michael Brooks, and you know, it's been a year since he passed, and I know that we've moved on. We've not moved on, but that's not really a good
We
word to use. But
we have moved forward with him.
move forward, yeah, from the 1 year anniversary of his death. But I just want to kind of get your thoughts. Like, were you you were of course aware of Michael, like many others. Um, Kind of your thoughts on him, and you know, your like your view of him, and did you like him, and uh, do you miss him, that kind of thing.
So, um, I'll answer that in two parts. The
Sure.
first part is this: as a writer, I like to tell people that I don't come from, I don't have an ideology per se. I come from a sort of intellectual pedigree. I have particular writers who have influenced me, whose style and sometimes their content has led me to the perspective that I hold. for example, Gore Vidal, H.L. Mencken,
Mm-hmm.
or Susan Sontag, Jean-Paul Sartre, um, Alexander Coburn, Christopher Hitchens, so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to say that, as that's the leftist perspective. That's how I got to the left, I should
Right.
say,
Right.
through various writers. And not all the writers I like are leftists.
Mm-hmm.
For example, H.L. Mencken could vaguely, barely be called a progressive. Karl Kraus was definitely not a leftist. I mean, he was a conservative, but he wasn't a leftist either. And so
Right.
that's how I got to the left. Concerning the second part, so concerning Michael Brooks, I'll be honest that I wasn't entirely aware of him
Right.
until after his death. Now, that's not because I didn't care about Michael Brooks. It is because, as I tell people a lot, writers make bad readers, and we make bad viewers because we are writing most of the time. And so I don't always keep up on everything that should be kept up on. And so, as far as knowing him while he was on the air, I did not. And I'm not going to make pretension or pretend that I did. However, after the fact, I have watched some of the things that videos that have come up with Michael Brooks. For example, I watched his response to somebody about the question of Israel and Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
I have listened to. I saw the craze that happened when Jimmy Dore went after. Oh, who was it? He went after somebody saying that they were using Michael Brooks as a human shield, basically to reflect or deflect criticism. I also did watch his his late critique of Jimmy Dore. Uh, I think Michael Brooks is a very, very interesting sort of individual.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't speak with a lot of authority about what he has said because, again, while I have sort of watched some of the things after his death, I have not kept up on that really.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've been writing, I've been doing
Yeah,
a
it's
lot,
understandable.
right? And so, but I definitely think he's a force for good. He's better than anything Jimmy Dore could ever be, and I think that I I I think that if how do I put this? One moment.
Take your time.
I enjoy the fact that he said, for example, be what was it? He says
Be kind to one another.
yeah, well, it's be harsh on systems, but be
Yeah.
kind with people.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Alexander Coburn, who pointed out during the whole craze with the Tea Party. He pointed out that a lot of the people who were joining the Tea Party were frightened. They were worried, afraid, and confused.
Mm-hmm.
And that when he pointed out that when you start calling them fascists and when you start, you won't talk to them, but you'll talk at them, that
Mm-hmm.
they recoil. And so I guess I appreciate Michael Brooks in the sense that it seems that he allowed for a very high-minded sort of discourse.
Mm-hmm.
And he attempted to have the kind of discussions that maybe would help somebody who's confused.
Yeah.
And if I were introducing anybody to the left, one of the people I would use is probably Michael Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a difference between me and Michael Brooks in the sense that I'm definitely more cynical. I'm also a lot more polemical, and to put it directly, I'm definitely more rude. But it takes all kinds, as they say.
Yeah. True.
And so and perhaps I'm in debt to Michael Brooks in ways I don't know, because I, again, haven't quite been paying attention. But I find that he was very good at bringing high-minded conversations to the low gutter ethics that is politics.
Mhm.
So
Well, particularly with me, one of the good things that I've credited for him for learning, with me to learn, even posthumously, would be his advocacy for Lula, and the left Brazilian politics, and his opposition to Jair Bolsonaro, which, you know, among many things about Bolsonaro, he's a tyrant. He's a coward. He's a rube. You know, I don't use that last word too lightly, but yeah,
yeah,
he's many things that I do not like about modern day international politics, because I know that whatever goes on in international politics happens in the United States, if to be blunt. So, what else we talk about? I want to talk about Matt Taibbi, kind of
yeah.
related to the whole Nathan Robinson thing. Um, so how do I say it? Because I just want to frame this so well.
I was gonna say, do you want to start this with a criticism? You just want to say what you do and don't like about Taibbi, or do you want to know what I think of Taibbi?
Well, I guess I could kind of start with what you think of him, because I will say this. I'm a fan. Generally speaking, I've been following him since Rolling Stone days. Um, I thought his Bouquet Ink was brilliantly done. I'll just pull it up. Here it is. I've been sort of reading it. So
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, my for the viewers, my TV is this way.
Oh,
And
is
so
it
it looks like it, or I'm sorry, not my TV. My
your
monitor is this
computer?
way.
Your
Yeah,
screen?
so it looks odd. I'm looking this way, but I am
No,
looking directly at you.
it's no problem. Yeah. So I thought the Bouquet Ink was great. It's kind of a dissection of what I think of news media and journalism in general. That sort of critique of we've become this culture of entertainment, so to speak, is what and pitting each other against one another because of different leftist media that we consume. It's also a sort of a continuation, if you will, of Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. So, in that respect, it was a good book. It was a great book, and I suggest if you wanted to go in a Taibbi route, I would start with that. Um,
Well, I have a bit of disdain for journalists. Um,
no
Carl
offense taken.
Carl Lacrosse. Sorry, Lacrosse. Wow, he's fine. He's randomly a sport. No, Carl Cross
Mhm.
said of journalists. He said he gave a definition of a journalist, and he said a journalist is a person without any ideas but with an ability to express them. A writer whose skill is improved by a deadline. The more time he has, the worse he writes.
Right.
And my so my opinion about Matt Taibbi is a bit split. On one hand, I distrust all journalists, and so there's a little bit of distrust with him. He technically is a journalist, but
Right.
it's appreciated that he turns his insight onto his own profession.
Right.
Um, you know, another thing that comes from Carl Cross is that he said if a um, excuse me, hold on, I'm thinking of the quote. Uh, one moment.
No problem.
I'm
Um,
thinking about it. Hold on.
yeah. Well, while you're thinking about it, well, I'll just kind of draw my own bias also. Like I would say to my viewers, go and watch the Sunday debate with Ben Burgess, because the view I have of him, of Taibbi, is in a way the same of Burgess. He's not like a Marxist or socialist of anything of that. He's a left lib. He's
Yeah.
like a New Deal lib. He coming from his profession at Rolling Stone, he's how I would describe him as Hunter S. Thompson, and again Ben described this as well. Ben Burgess, Hunter S. Thompson, chasing George McGovern around the campaign trail kind of thing. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and while he does a show with Useful Idiots with Katie Halper, who's like
Yeah. I've listened to that a few times. Yeah.
a real progressive and a real leftist. You know, again, I personally, like I said, I subscribe to a Substack as well. There are a lot of things on there that I read that I agree with, a lot of things I disagree with, but my view is like that's his view. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even the stuff I disagree with, like that's Taibbi's view. I respect that. He did it. He's done several, like 2 articles critical of NPR, and I've said, look, I used to be an avid listener. I don't listen much anymore, so those articles, I'm not like quote unquote offended by them.
Yes.
But that's
Right.
his view, and I respect it. And he does do great work. I mean, in some respects.
Right. Well, and I'll say this because I remembered the quote finally.
Right.
So Karl Kraus said that if the reporter can kill our imagination with his truth, he can threaten our lives with his lies. And so when I deal with somebody like Matt Taibbi, I with you, with your perspective, I do enjoy some of the things he has to say.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, I wrote an article called "Bird Brains: Philosophy for the Useless,"
Mm-hmm.
in which I went after Taibbi for his article on Herbert.
Marcuse.
Yeah, Marcuse. I have a hard time saying names. The fact that I like French philosophers drives me insane because I can't even say their names half the time.
Their names are so difficult to pronounce.
Right. And so he wrote about Marcuse, and is it Herbert or Herbert?
Herbert. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
Herbert.
He talked about him in a very lazy fashion, if you ask me. It was very
Mm-hmm.
polemical. It was a tad bit entertaining if you can overlook the ignorance of it.
Mm.
And so I'm not a Marcuse expert, but I know for a fact that it is a tradition amongst journalists to either support or go after certain philosophers. H.M. Lincoln did it with Friedrich Nietzsche. For example, Susan Sontag went on and on about Immanuel Kant and Walter Benjamin. Benjamin, sorry. And so it's very normal for journalists to go after particular philosophers or support them. But Matt Taibbi has a tendency sometimes, and it's on display most with the Marcuse article, to do what I call defacing the discourse, where what he does is he develops a straw man of what Marcuse is, and then he absolutely destroys it. And what happens is any notion of the idea or the ideas of Marcuse are ignored and replaced with this sort of odd presentation that it's not in fact true.
Mm-hmm.
And so with with his article, what happens is you get you get this idea of Marcuse as some kind of secretive, authoritarian sort of figure. And so my issue with Matt Taibbi is that he is a bit like Hunter Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes like Hunter S. Thompson. But at the same time, sometimes I think he doesn't have a grasp of the issues that he thinks he does.
Right.
And it causes for the discourse to be defaced a bit, where we when you follow Matt Taibbi's ideas, you end up in a different world where certain things have particular meanings that they
Right.
don't actually have.
Mhm.
This is something that like Nathan Robinson's article where he, how to end up serving the right, where he went after Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi. That article was a bad article. It was a bit shrill, and
Yeah, it was.
yes, and it didn't address what I'm talking about, because it's one thing to go after somebody for being on Fox News. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You've got to reach the other side of the country. You've got to reach the other people. But um it's also another thing to say, oh well now they're serving the right, when in fact a lot of leftist media won't even talk to Taibbi or Glenn Greenwald
Mhm.
outside of to make fun of them or to denounce them. So you've given them no other options.
Right.
That said, though, Matt Taibbi has a tendency not to discuss things very clearly, particularly abstract concepts. I feel like the disconnect with Taibbi is that he has a grasp of very concrete things. Like, he knows about certain things that are going on the ground. He's, a reporter at heart, but when it gets to relating that to the rest of society, or relating that to history, or relating that to different, issues, I think he lacks the ability to do so.
Right.
Now, it doesn't make him wrong. It also doesn't make him evil. I think you're right that he's a left liberal. Definitely in the tradition of, say, the New Deal. But he, I think he should stay away from abstracting his opinion, so to speak, or
Yeah.
at least try to do better.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I myself, even as a fan of him, I do tend to be critical. I do tend to question. Like I said, there's some articles that he's written since he's been on Substack that I disagree with, and I'm like, okay, I don't really agree with this, but whatever. It's Matt's,
Right.
Taibbi's opinion, and he's entitled to it. It's funny that you mentioned, going back to Robinson, the article in question about his shrill critique of Greenwald and Taibbi. Um, so, with regards to him, on the other side of the coin, I used to like Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah.
I don't anymore because of this seismic shift of censorship that he has claimed, which really wasn't. And I don't know if you know who Ken Silverstein is. He used to work for The Intercept. He runs a website called Washington Babylon. If not, I'll send you a website link if you're
Yeah,
interested.
you should definitely send me a link for that.
Absolutely. So anyway, he wrote a piece, Silverstein, about critiquing Glenn Greenwald, but which basically kind of puts Greenwald in like this retconning way I should say, of him sort of being this like leftist sort of hero as we're in regards to Snowden and the Brazil leaks. Because, as we know, the Snowden leaks happened under a Democratic president, and that made him a hero to the left, one way or another. And he took it he saw this and took it further, and by endorsing people like Bernie Sanders in 2016 and like 2020. So it made him even further hero to the left. So what I didn't really know, and I credit also Joe Payne from Political Pain for kind of explaining this to me, is that Glenn Greenwald is not really the sort of leftist that we think he is. He's a civil libertarian. I mean, he rage quit The Intercept. He didn't leave because of censorship. The Hunter Biden laptop story, and he had no way of vetting it. He was in Brazil. He wasn't. he wasn't in the DC offices with the other Intercept reporters. He had virtually no way of vetting the story, and so decided to resign under this like trumped up, no pun intended, charge of censorship. When in fact, as I said, he rage quit, and he's also been a trial lawyer. A piece also in the Silverstein story was that he, when he was a trial lawyer, he represented Matthew Hale, who was a what was it, a neo-Nazi white supremacist that Greenwald represented in the early '90s. You okay?
Yes.
You
Oh,
looked a
oh,
little out of sync.
no, no. No,
Okay.
I'm just listening. I'm just listening.
Okay. It looked like you were zoning out there for a moment. I was like, oh,
Oh
okay.
no, no, no.
It
I'm
is
just taking in
Sunday
all
after all.
well, I'm just taking in all the information you're telling me because I have
Yeah.
my own opinions about Greenwald.
No problem. Um, so anyway, so he represented this uh, white supremacist neo-Nazi, not neo-Nazist Matthew Hale in the early '90s as a trial lawyer, and he also supported the Bush administration's uh, reasons for waging war in Iraq in 2003, and has tried to he's tried to retcon that, just like he's retconning like his support for not necessarily Snowden, but for like leftist causes, and going on Tucker Carlson's show and saying that Carlson and Donald Trump are quote unquote real socialists, which we know, you and I both know, that's BS, and there's no truth to the matter. Um, so having said all that, and hopefully you'll be able to take it all in, uh, I'll kind of give you the last word on
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't know some of that. I will take the trial lawyer aspect and hold it at arm's length because I believe, and I am not certain, but I believe oftentimes lawyers are not given or not, they don't choose their cases, they're often given them. So,
it. Right.
and now I believe that's the case. People can fact check me if they want because I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. So, but I'll hold that at arm's length until I get information about that because if you're given cases and you don't choose them, then it's not entirely his fault. Plus, unfortunately, in law, in the legal system for the United States, it is an adversarial one, and so you are kind of taught to defend
Mm-hmm.
whoever you have as a client. So it may not entirely be his fault on that account. Now, that aside, I was aware that he was pretty much a civil libertarian. Um, I had written an article called "Wearing Your Sunglasses at Night: How to Be a Radical in America," where
Good title.
I yes, well, where I mentioned Glenn Greenwald as a radical, and I that's actually how I got that article sent to me about, or that Nathan Robinson article sent to me actually, is somebody read my uh article and they decided to correct me using Nathan Robinson. I My point of including Glenn Greenwald as a radical was not mostly because of his views. It was because he had done something. He had helped Edward Snowden. Now, does that absolve you or does that make you a hero? Not really. If your beliefs are of a particular flavor, and you don't change them after you've, let's say, helped Edward Snowden, for example, then you can't pretend to be something that you don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I called him a radical, and a lot of people were just trying to, oh, he's not a leftist. Like, I didn't say he was a leftist. I said he was a radical,
Mm-hmm.
which is different entirely. Well, not entirely. You can be a leftist and be a radical. I consider myself, kind of a radicalist. on the left. But radicals don't have a particular part of the political spectrum. They can be on either side. But for Glenn Greenwald, I've kind of watched this kind of spiral out of control because I admired him for what he did with Edward Snowden.
Me too.
And when I didn't have the information I do now, when he left The Intercept, I kind of trusted his story. I didn't take it as fact, but I thought, well, something probably happened. Plus, it kind of plays to my cynicism. So I definitely thought that, well, maybe they just didn't let him do stuff. I'm sorry, they didn't let him publish a story that was important. I was not aware of the fact that he didn't have any sources for it, which is an important thing to admit, to tell people. And if you don't tell them, I think that's tantamount to lying. You're definitely trying to control the narrative. Now, I think Glenn Greenwald as a specific issue is boring, but let's make it a more general issue. Are non-leftists useful to the left? I think they are. I think that, for example, a lot of the writers that I like are not leftists, but oftentimes people who are not on the left see the left far more clearly than the left does. And so, the thing about Glenn Greenwald is we can't just out of hand reject the guy. We should make it clear that he's not on the left. And people need to stop being confused about that. There's no confusion. There's no maybe if, maybe so. No, he's a civil libertarian. And that's it.
Yeah.
And not only is he civil libertarian, he, supported the war in Iraq. Yeah. So he's not a leftist. But at the same time, him and Matt Taibbi, who I think is a little bit further left than Greenwald, are useful. They they dig up what's going on and they present it to us. At their best. At their worst, they just spout nonsense. And so they're useful. But that doesn't mean that we have, not everything that's good or useful to the left has to be on the left.
Yeah.
There's a great deal of things not on the left that are or should be important to us. And Taibbi and Greenwald are two of those. And we should be able to take what they say with a grain of salt. We should understand that they are good reporters, but that they are journalists overall. And we should be skeptical of what they have to say. Honestly, a bit of a Karl Kraus style skepticism is important. We do need to remember that a reporter, if they can kill the imagination with their truth, can threaten our lives with their lies.
Right.
So we should be cautious. I also don't want to pretend that I'm a gatekeeper for the left. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are on the left. I don't think they are. I think it's out of mind. For Glenn Greenwald, it's out of mind. For Matt Taibbi, definitely on the liberal side of left. So,
right. But, after all, he worked for Rolling Stone, so.
Right, and so, yeah, right, and so, but that's my opinion on it. They are not far leftists. They are not, they're not like Alexander Coburn. They don't even reach the level of the early Christopher Hitchens. But they are useful, and we should see them that way. Neither good nor bad, but useful.
Right. That's actually a fair point. Again, it's made me see Taibbi a little bit more in that way,
Right.
Greenwald, it might take some time, but I'm willing to take as much time as I need to.
Well, the thing about usefulness is that it expires,
Right.
and so maybe Greenwald's past that expiration date. Maybe he's sour
Oh
milk.
yeah.
He might be sour milk
Maybe.
in the back of the fridge, and it's time to throw him out. But but well, but the question is how useful somebody is.
Yeah.
Is he illuminating perspectives? Is he trying to help? With is he trying to help create solidarity, or is he sitting there? Is he sitting there drawing in the dirt and throwing rocks? You know,
Yeah.
and so I would say Glenn Greenwald is about at that expiration date, unless he decides to saddle up here and go after some other corruption that isn't
Right.
entirely a production of his own mind.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but Matt Taibbi's useful.
Yeah. I think if we keep at least one of them useful, they'll be of
Right.
good
Right.
nature.
Yeah, that we should just remember that you got to throw out the sour milk. That's what you got to
Yeah. And obviously Taibbi's not the sour milk.
do. Yeah, that's right.
He's the maybe the hard cookie.
I don't know. I don't know how to extend that analogy. I never have.
I could have came up with a better analogy.
Well, I was going to
to
say I don't know how to extend that analogy. I usually only have 1 liter of milk at a time. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So let's see. We're at 1:38. So do you have anything else to say, or you want to stick around a little longer? I didn't really plan. I didn't really know how long we do this. I figured we'd be here for about an hour. But
no, you're good. Let's see. Actually, here's a better way to do this. Outside of the questions you've already asked me, do you have any other questions? So, for example, like, do you have questions about my influences as a writer? Do you have a question about maybe asking where I sit on the leftist spectrum, or do you have? I should put it this way: do you have any other questions?
Well, yeah, actually, I've been kind of. This question has been sort of in the back of my mind for a long time, because when I meet someone new on the left, whether they're progressive, socialists, Marxists, leftists, whatever, and again, as a journalist, as what I call myself, an independent journalist, but I'm more of an independent blogger at this point.
Right. Yeah. Well. Don't take my skepticism as moral scorn. As long as you do your job correctly. Again. Yeah.
No problem. And plus I love constructive criticism.
Right.
I will say that, because it does make me a better person.
I don't know if I have constructive criticism, but I have witty criticism.
That works too. That works too. So yeah, I would like to kind of ask you how you sort of how you got to the left, because I've been asked this question before with Carter Khrushchevman, or Khrushchevman. He asked me the same question, so I'll ask you this same question,
Okay.
which is simply, how did you become a leftist?
Well, believe it or not, a long time ago in a galaxy.
A long time ago, yeah, in a galaxy far, far away.
I started out actually as a conservative Christian when I was in high school. A good many people who probably were in high school probably remember my various, let us say, pathetic attempts to argue for Christian conservatism. I liked people like Newt Gingrich, so I was quite the degenerate. And
your rebellious days.
Yes, and so the first thing that happened was I lost faith in God, or the way I like to put it is I realized I didn't have any faith at all. And so I moved to a sort of a libertarianism. I flirted with objectivism, and all of this is very painful. You don't understand how we all make mistakes, but I seem to have made them continuous.
Well, we learn from them too.
I
So we
I,
learn
I
from
would
the
like
pain.
I would like to think so. So, but I flirted with objectivism and libertarianism, and um, the first time I became a leftist, or started thinking about, I should say, thinking about becoming a
Hmm.
leftist, was um I read an article by Christopher Hitchens. He had died when I had read it.
Hmm.
Like he had died, I think a year before. And so people were, there were articles of his that they were putting out, and people were talking about him, and I forget which article it was. It was an earlier article.
Hmm.
I'd have to search my memory and remember exactly what it was. But I was reading it and I thought, this kind of makes sense. It's very, very, it was very well written. For me, I often take to things that are well written before I take to things that are well argued. Which I think is kind of how everybody is, to a degree. It's hard for us to change our opinions unless the transition is smooth. And so it started out with that, but I started to realize that a lot of the opinions I held were not right wing opinions. I tried to mold them into right wing opinions, but it turns out that they weren't. And so I started reading other left wing thinkers, Alexander Coburn, um, Susan Sontag. Those were one of my two first leftist uh,
Hmm.
writers that I read. Um,
And then Gore Vidal.
yeah, well, actually, before Gore Vidal, excuse me, what cemented me on the left was actually Jean-Paul Sartre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I started reading him because I enjoy philosophy. I don't know if I'm a good philosopher, but I don't pontificate enough. But I started reading Jean-Paul Sartre because I like philosophy, and I was reading through his Being and Nothingness, and then I started reading some of his other work. Excuse me again, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
He made it clear that freedom was not only compatible with the left, but it was at the center of the
Hmm.
left. And so from then on, I started to read other people, left and right, but I sort of ended up cementing myself on the left. Um, for example, with Marxism, I would consider myself a fellow traveler. I have no faith in revolution, but I do think that Marx is correct about a lot of his observations and a lot of his arguments. And so I take a very kind of fellow traveler style um, stance with Marxism. Um, and so ever since then, it's developed. I've come across Gore Vidal. Um, as as much as to where I stand on the left, a good friend of mine, and you may have actually talked to her too. Um, she described herself as a non-denominational leftist, which is pretty much where I'm at. I don't necessarily subscribe to any particular ideology.
Hmm.
I center my ideas more on people, um, particular writers, as opposed to ideologies. I also try to center it on observations.
Right.
Observation is important to me.
Of course.
Um, the ultimate goal for me as a writer on the left, though, is actually a theme I've taken from Karl Kraus, um, who said that his goal was to bring the reader back to the surface. I think we have been told to look inward as it goes. We have been told to look inward for far too long, and I think that where we are seeking depth, we should be looking at the world at an eye level. We should be
Hmm.
looking reality in the face.
Yeah.
And so that's what I write for, because I think thinking doesn't matter if it's your own quote unquote depth.
Hmm.
I think depth is, all depth, I think, is created. It's made up. It's not that it's not useful, but it's not real. And when your thinking only applies to this sort of secret depth that you've built for yourself,
Right.
it doesn't help you. There, it's like striking flint against a leaf. You're not going to get fired. And so I think the left is about, or should be about, freedom, but I think it should also it should be mainly about liberation.
Right.
And liberation requires that one grapples with reality. And I think we have freedom already, in the sense that that's just our condition. That's how we are as creatures. But I think that liberation is a project, as opposed to freedom being just what is. And for me, that's what I like about the left, and that's my goal. I think that should be the left goal as well, is to establish liberation for all individuals.
That sounds like a great point. That's a point of the left that I was not aware of. So that's a great point to make. I mean, I will say that the beginning part of that, I definitely lived that life myself, being in a conservative town. I wasn't necessarily conservative Christian, but I was raised in a conservative mindset, and I would have called myself conservative. Like, I identified, and you're like the first person I've ever told this to, but from about 2000 to 2008, I identified as a Republican. Um, what did me over was, of course, Barack Obama. Uh, you know, even before that, I started getting disillusioned with the Republican Party in regards to Iraq, but still consider myself one up until '08, but was becoming disillusioned. I was watching a lot of MSNBC at that point, particularly Keith Olbermann, because I like at the time, again, the Bush years, he was that voice for questioning the Iraq War. So I do credit him in that time period for kind of making me eventually leave the Republican Party, or
Right.
not being identifying as Republican anymore. So, yeah, Barack Obama was, I admit, the person that made me identify as a leftist, or at least someone on the left. Became very disillusioned with his presidency, because he didn't do a lot of the things that he said he would, and got bought and paid for by the corporate machine that is Wall Street, the Koch brother types. And then Bernie Sanders, lo and behold, came along, and I started learning a little bit more about democratic socialism, and got way into Marx and Friedrich Engels, and now I'm into like Leon Trotsky and all those good philosophical and philosophical thinkers. And I credit Bernie for pushing me in that socialist mindset, and now I'm a proud supporter of DSA, and
Right.
so.
Well, um,
But I'm also still learning. I will say that,
right.
as far as a disclaimer,
Well,
I'm learning. I'm still reading. I'm still absorbing things. I'm more of like a democratic socialist in training, meaning I don't feel like I'm there yet. I still have a lot to learn, and still have a lot to be open to. So basically, what I'm saying is I'm an open-minded person. When it comes to
well,
people.
right. Well, it's better. It's better to be somebody who becomes a leftist than one who just accepts the left, because we've come from the other side. So I think we're, although I think that's a very typical Midwestern story.
Yeah.
The Midwest is pretty purple, if not
Yeah, it is.
a slight tinge of red. Um, I will say though, as my politics has changed, my personality has not. I am still a curmudgeon. I am a misanthrope. I find people to be annoying, and I am an
Don't we
elitist.
all?
Yes, and I'm quite the elitist. But so I have my own issues with certain organizations. I'm more of a writer on the edge than I am a writer in support of a particular thing.
Right.
I think the only organization I've come across so far that I've actually found interesting was the Platypus Affiliates,
Mm.
which I believe Chris Catrone is a part of, and hopefully I can be a part of here at some point. But nevertheless, I find that my evolution in politics has allowed me to have a lot of perspectives. I don't like the term open mind or being open minded, because I think of Terry Pratchett, who talked about, some people have such open minds that he says that the problem with having an open mind is that people like to come over and stick stuff in it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not open minded. I'm not narrow thinking.
Right.
But nevertheless, I know where my boundary. I know what I believe. I'll put it that way.
Right.
So
That's it.
right, and so, but yeah, no, that's an interesting way, and everybody has to have somebody who's a catalyst for change, a person or a thinker. And just because you weren't like, oh yeah, I was radicalized by Karl Marx himself, like you don't have to be. There's a point where everybody, well, I say everybody, there's a point where some people change their opinions, and the catalyst comes as it does. We don't really have control over that. So
As far as like media, I mentioned Keith Olbermann. Like the weird, the ironic thing with me being saying I was a Republican when I was much younger was that's because I was politically ignorant. I grew up in a town that was conservative. We're both Midwesterns from Missouri, and it's just like it's what we were taught to believe in the schools that we grew up in, that this is this is what it is, and this is right and this is wrong, and this is how it is. You weren't allowed to like think for yourself until you're like teenage years. As far as media, like I mentioned Keith Olbermann, like I wouldn't necessarily be a fan of him now, just because and there's just a lot of stuff that he's done that I don't necessarily agree with him on. But like back in like 2008, I was really big on him, and because he had a lot of good points of view. And also I came across the Young Turks when they were like very like a small show when I was a sophomore in high school.
When they were very Young Turks.
Yeah, when they were like young, like
Yeah.
I think when they were like when they would do like a show, when they were like a rinky-dink show on YouTube, they had yet to grow into the thing they are now.
And basically what you're noting is that these people, relative to that time, were to your left, and so they had some very good opinions that kind of moved you over.
Yeah,
past
but
that.
in a good way. So like with Keith Olbermann, I don't like anything he says and does. Like it's ironic because I follow him on Twitter just to see what he says, and I can comment on him and be like, "Hey, dude, I don't see that." But anyway, as far as Young Turks, so this is going to be very controversial, to put it lightly, but I feel the more controversial, the better.
Well, if you're going to step on toes, you might as well break it.
Well, and I know we're also probably going to have some very difference of opinion on TYT, because I think from the look of it, you would probably be more skeptical of them and probably more critical, which is fine. Like, I don't know, like as far as non-political stuff like pop culture, I would probably disagree with them on a lot of things. As far as like critiquing things about pop culture that shouldn't. As far as politics, like as far as in the democratic socialist model, I agree with them. All right, at least I agree with Anna Kasparian. Um, as see now I've lost my train of thought. As far as how they've evolved, I get the story. They accepted some money, like it was like an investment deal with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and like all of a sudden they're elitist, and I get it. And Anna Kasparian has talked about this before on the Weekend Show with Jacobin. She's the main EP of TYT. They go after the Democratic establishment like every day. They attack Nancy Pelosi like 100% of the time. As far as the money issue, she's like, look, I wish we didn't have to do that, but without it, we probably wouldn't survive. And so, from my take about it, is like, it's funny that Jimmy Dore, who used to be at TYT, now he left, and he's been very critical of them taking that money. It's interesting because when the people that were there, and I include Emma Vigeland, who now is at Majority Report, she was like, or they all were like, yeah, when Jimmy was at TYT, he didn't bring this up before, and all of a sudden now he's gone. It's like he's now thinking it's a bad thing. Like that's what paid him for like 5 or 6 years, yeah. So of course, like to kind of veer away from the Jimmy Dore, that was unexpected. But as far as like TYT, yeah, they as they've gotten bigger, they've gotten more controversial, and they've been sort of like in the Jimmy Dore era, in the Aaron Mate people, in the fanship of those people, they've become a thorn in the side for what I would call the far leftist, with, again, for lack of a better term. I'll plead the fifth and say I still watch them. I'm still a fan. I don't agree with everything they say and do. I can be critical. But yeah, I just want to. I'm curious. I'm just with your facial expressions. It's like I'm.
No,
like,
you're good. You're good.
How
You're
am I
good.
supposed to articulate
Well,
this?
I was still reacting to you bringing up Jimmy Dore.
Oh.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. Well.
It's a combination of an elitist smirk and a hiding of disgust. But
Yeah.
continue.
Well, I just wanted to kind of get your take, and I will be very understanding if you disagree. Like, again, you're probably going to be a little bit more critical of them than I am, as far as editorial stance and where they are on the left, and your perception of Jank and Anna, both of which I like. I will give them. So yeah. So give me your take to end it.
Well, I'm going to surprise you here. I don't watch the Young Turks. It's not
Understandable.
not out of disdain,
Right.
not out of any opinion. I don't really have an opinion on them. I will zoom in on this particular thing though. So Jimmy Dore criticizing them for taking money is hilarious, considering what he has, like 2 houses, doesn't he?
Oh, hell yes.
Sells
He's
books.
he's relying on like super chat money and YouTube money, Patreon money to fund his lifestyle.
And he sells books. His ridiculous fucking books and stuff. Like, don't talk about, oh, you took money from. Yeah, well, you're taking money every day from your viewers. But here's the thing: him taking money and Young Turks taking money, neither of that should matter to people, because we are not in a post-capitalist society.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a capitalist society, which means that right now, for better or for worse, you are stuck having to make money and having to play that game, because there is no alternative. The left, as far as I'm concerned, is mostly dead, if not completely dead. And it's not left, or I'm sorry, it's not dead in the sense that there's no leftists. There is no left, but there's a bunch of leftists. It's just that it's not a united movement, and so it's not like there's an alternative organization where the Young Turks can ask them for money, or there's a there's an alternative way to. There's no alternative right now. You have to make money by the system that you are in, and
Right.
we are immersed in capitalism. So that kind of response by Jimmy Dore, that's him poking the amygdala. He wants people to get upset, like he doesn't also do it.
Right.
But I will definitely go check out the Young Turks at some point here, so I can actually formulate an opinion. I try not to have opinions about things that I don't know anything about. It is a flaw of everybody who has, all the opinion makers on the internet have this flaw. If you ask them a question and they don't know the answer, they will just talk anyway, and they shouldn't. So I don't know anything about the Young Turks. I will watch and I will give an opinion probably later. But I just think that criticism by Jimmy Dore, not only does it not hold any water, it's a colander. It's
Right.
like the water out.
It's kind of the same thing with the hypocrisy that we were talking about earlier, about like him being critical of them taking money while he does it himself. I mean, I've only responded, and to be quite honest, again, to put a period on this, because we do need to wrap it up. But
Yeah.
to kind of put a period on it, like I've only quote unquote called him out once for this, and he didn't respond. But I just said, look, man, you're doing the exact same thing that you're criticizing me for, which is taking borrowed money, donated money, and super chat money and Patreon money, and funding your funding your lavish lifestyle as a
Right.
leftist.
Yeah.
And we all know what's that?
Oh, I was gonna say we live in a Fidelian republic, and we're all grifters.
Yeah, that's the next show I'm gonna do, is how to be a grifter, because I was actually, well, like I have this thing, like I know I just started. I'm getting kind of I'm now not really have my whole feet in the water yet. I'm just dipping my toes in, but
Yeah.
already I'm starting to like get this formation. Like, hey, am I a grifter? So I have to kind of do some
Well,
research.
I think capitalism makes us all grifters. I think it's the problem. It's an issue with capitalism, but just grifter should be understood in the sense that I think that capitalism promotes the myth of competition, and that
Right,
competition doesn't exist. And since
right.
that competition doesn't exist, since there's no way for me to actually compete with you in any sort of fair way with rules, I have to
Hmm.
grift.
Yeah,
And so, when I say grifter, a lot of people use that as a pejorative. Sometimes they use it as a pejorative, but usually I'm just being descriptive. And
yeah.
Fidelian, by the way, Fidelian Republic comes from Herman Melville's book, The Confidence Man. The
Hmm.
name of the boat that everybody's on, and that where the story is about people on a boat called the Fidel, where everybody on there is conning everybody else,
Right,
and that's how I see the United States right now. We're all on a
sure.
boat, conning each other, grifting each other, and
Name calling, doing all
yeah,
that kind of stuff.
yeah, and we might, the boat, the book ends with the boat. It's possible that the boat's gonna crash, and that's where we're at.
If it hasn't already crashed,
Yes,
it probably crashed. It should have crashed like maybe 4 years ago.
right,
But it's like the Titanic. Is it going to hit the iceberg or is it not?
right,
Like
absolutely.
in a reality, in a parallel universe. Nathan Robinson wrote a novel, his memoir at 28.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
weird.
He wrote his memoir at 28, and personally, there's nothing. I'm 26. There's
Uh
nothing
huh.
that a 28-year-old knows that's so important that you have to print it as a. Or there's nothing that's happened in the life of a 28-year-old that's so important
Right. It
that you
hasn't
have to print
his
it. Yeah,
he
because
hasn't even started yet.
hell, you're still developing. Your brain fully develops at the age of 25. You've been moving past that development for what, only 3 years.
Yeah.
But plus nothing against him. He is successful in whatever way it is,
Right.
but we don't need a memoir, at 28.
Yet. Yeah,
That
at least not
yeah,
yet.
not yet. That's what pop stars do. They put
Yeah.
out their memoirs early, and
Yeah. And
and
then it's
to
just like,
take a witticism from Gore Vidal, the reason they put out their memoirs is because they have lifestyles, not lives, and
yeah,
so one has to ask that question about Nathan Robinson, you know, you know, the early memoirist, maybe he just has a
yeah.
life, maybe he just has a lifestyle, not a life.
Yeah, I think I saw it on Amazon, and it got like 1 star review.
Yep.
And I was just like, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
liking this, dude.
Yeah.
I
So,
thought about like spur of the moment, like buying it and just like reading it for myself. But I was like,
well,
not yet.
as you read in the article, the only reason I would buy Nathan Robinson's memoir is so that I could physically throw it in the fire.
Throw it in the fireplace and make it burn to charcoal.
Yes.
Oh boy. Well,
I think that's a good place to end. That was
yeah.
a good witty way.
Throw it
That's a
in the
good witty
fireplace.
way to bring that to a close.
So I do, before I let you go, and I know that
Yes.
we're busy, but
No,
I
you're
was
good.
gonna do this in a DM, but I can't help myself, so I apologize. So as I have just now started the show, and I want to kind of let it sort of, I want to kind of try new things, and I've been wanting to kind of have it build from just a show that's talking about everything under the sun and using like YouTube clips and screen sharing articles. I want to make it more interesting, and so in that case, I would like you to come on as a nightly philosophical guest during the main show, if possible.
That would be interesting. As long as it's on the weekends, because
Okay.
as I've told people, well, I guess I don't know exactly when your night shows begin
It
because
starts at 7 and then goes till 10,
okay, and what days are those?
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll explain this. I might be getting a new job here where that will be possible, but for the moment, like I could do it on this Monday because it's Labor Day,
Yeah, definitely.
but otherwise, I um will. I here. Let me put it this way. I would like to. I
Of
would be honored
course.
to. Let me see about my schedule and certain things like that. Worst comes to worst, we might have to start it off with me maybe frequenting on the weekends, and then I will find a way to be there on the weekdays.
No
And
problem.
would it be every day, or would it be just 1 or 2 days or 3 days?
Um, that's a good question. I like it to be every day, but I don't want you because it's a nighttime show and I do run kind of late. I don't want it for you to be like where you don't get enough sleep at night. So
No.
probably just do 1 or 2 days in the beginning, and then as you say, if your schedule becomes more like available or flexible, we just move from there.
All right. Well, that works for me then. We'll start off with 1 or 2 days. We'll work around this, and hopefully everybody here will see me on here more.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I
All
guess
right.
the segment would be philosophy talk with, or that's bad.
It could be philosophy. We'll think of an interesting name.
Yeah,
I can do that. I'm a writer. I'm supposed to be creative.
we'll do a new segment every
Right.
week with you coming on.
Right.
Taking a page from Ben Burgess' book, when he used to have David Griscom on, when they would do Outlaws and Revolutionaries, and he would come on and talk about some. David would come on and do some talk about some country artists,
Right.
and they don't do it anymore. But
Right.
when I would
Well.
watch the show, I'd be like, wow, that's very interesting.
Right.
I should do
Well.
something like that.
I will say nothing pleases me more than to give my opinion on things. So I will definitely like to do that. Maybe to end this show with a quote from Gore Vidal. Um, I am um, I am a tiresome nag and a propagandist, complacent in the complacent in the idea that everything would be going well if people would just listen to me.
Truer words are spoken than most. The late great Warvidal. Uh, Read Palimpsest if you, for those who want to kind of start. Yeah. So I saw you're reading Empire Self, Jay Perini's book,
Yes.
and my library copy has a version that I checked out, but I'm not reading yet. I don't know why.
Right.
'Cause-
I read biographies in the same way people use nicotine patches. It's because I will enjoy a writer a lot, but I obsess. It's one of
yeah,
the downfalls of being a writer, and so I use biographies to give myself a little distance so I can understand the humanity behind the writer. And
good
so
take.
yeah, so it's a very good biography, by the way. Very interesting. It's very candid. He actually had to wait till Gore Vidal died because he
Right.
assumed that Gore Vidal would probably have a few things to say.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing on the obsessive, that's just the thing about writers is that you're always obsessive about your craft before you own it, and that's just the way to go.
Yeah.
So Charlie, or should you go by Charlie or RC?
I go by Charles usually. RC Roberts is my byline.
Okay.
So as long as you don't call me Chuck, because
Okay.
people have died for less. But
I'll just refer you to your byline in
right.
a professional way.
RC
So
Roberts. All right.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot better. It sounds better. It's like Bob Dylan.
Sounds it's God. It sounds dignified. I'm gonna have to get
Yeah,
myself.
it does.
I'm gonna have to get myself one of those powdered wigs. Which is
Don't we all?
RC Roberts has entered the room. Yes.
All right, so that
Thank you.
was.
Thank you for having me on. By the way,
Oh,
I
no
appreciate it.
problem. And yeah, we'll get our schedules sorted out to where you can do the segment, and
All right.
we can do it. Make this show a lot easier because I really enjoyed. I just also I'm not trying to just extend our time, but I met you through Movie Night Extravaganza, and we just started DMing, chatting, and got to know one another better. And hopefully, now that everyone's kind of slowly but surely going out after being quarantined for a year, we can hang out because we live technically in the same state,
Yeah,
in the same.
we need to
Go
get
ahead.
we need to get all three Midwest leftists together so that solidarity, right?
Yes, definite solidarity. We can have chats and debates over hamburgers and ice cream or whatever we like. If you're
Right.
not a hamburger person, we can
Well,
find
I'm
something else.
yeah. No. Well, yeah. It would definitely be good to meet you, and I'm sure Seth would also like to meet you. So the
Yeah,
three leftists in the Midwest.
definitely. So that's RC. I'm talking with RC Roberts, of Ferocia Animi at Substack.com. Do you have anything else you want to plug?
Every week I have an essay installment called Notes in the Margin, except for obviously this week. But hopefully you guys will check it out. The URL for Ferocia Animi's Substack is Ferocia FEROCIA.substack.com. I am also
Okay.
on. I also want to plug the other podcast that I'm on, which is These Are Bad Movies with Amy Bell and Amanda, and I'm not going to attempt to say her last name because it's I'm a great writer. I have problems saying words,
Don't
and
we?
but I am on there as a recurring guest. And if you guys want to go check out their Facebook page, it's These Are Bad Movies. Very insightful stuff on that, and hopefully I'll be a recurring guest on here as well. And
Yeah.
hopefully you will all enjoy my various eloquently put, hateful opinions.
Well, I think we've done enough of it already here, so I'm just imagining the responses that people are going to get from the left and the right. So who knows? All right. Well, RC, thanks for coming on TGRS.
No
This is the
problem.
first Sunday show that I've done with a guest, so I'm
Right. So,
again trying to do
well,
new things. So,
I was going to say I have I have a solution for you when this is over about the
mhm.
schedule stuff. But thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and I enjoyed myself as well. It's nice to have somebody to tell your opinions to. So
Yeah, definitely. So, thanks for stopping by, man. I appreciate
no
it.
problem.
All right. That was RC Roberts from Ferocia Animi. You can go check that out. I'll have a link in the description for the YouTube in the YouTube stream below when this is released. As always, you can find me. Let me pull it up. The captions. As this is the day before Labor Day, I might do a show tomorrow, uh, pending pending my how I'm feeling, so to speak. But anyway, you can catch me TGRS, the John Rush Show, Monday through Friday, 7 to 10, on Twitch and YouTube. You can read me on my personal Substack, which again, tgrs.substack.com. I blog there, try to blog there at least weekly. Maybe even more since I've already had an interview with a fellow Substack. So again, go read Ferocia Animi. I can't plug it good enough. Again, social media is all there: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Patreon. As I said before, give what you can, man. Just give what you can. It doesn't matter if it's $1, 5, 10, whatever. It keeps the show going, and if I'm able to get a virtual staff, I'd be able to hopefully pay them more, have a salary, which would be good. Of course, like and subscribe. So yeah, I will see you guys hopefully tomorrow. If not, have a good Labor Day weekend. As I said, be safe, be kind to one another, be kind to one another. Left is best. Rest in power to Michael Brooks. Rest in power to Ed Asner. And have a good rest of your week, man. Peace.